What if the thing you're holding on to right now is the very thing that's quietly draining your life? We grow up believing that we need to have things to feel secure. A stable relationship, a solid career, recognition, control. We build our identities around what we can keep, protect, and call mine. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one likes to face. None of it is actually yours. Not permanently, not safely, not in the way you think. People change, circumstances collapse, time takes everything eventually. And yet, even knowing this, you still cling, sometimes harder than ever. Why? Because letting go feels like losing yourself. But Viktor Frankl saw something deeper. He witnessed people lose everything, their homes, their families, their freedom, and still discover something no one could take from them. A final freedom, a way to stand in the middle of loss and not be destroyed by it. So maybe the real question isn't why nothing is yours. Maybe the real question is, if nothing in this world truly belongs to you, then what actually does? And more importantly, what happens when you finally stop clinging? In this video, we're going to break this down into 5 powerful lessons that challenge the way you see attachment, loss, and meaning itself. And the last one might completely change how you live your life. Lesson 1. You don't possess things, you experience them. Think about how often you say, my life, my relationship, my success. It sounds natural, almost unquestionable. But hidden inside that language is an illusion that shapes the way you suffer. Because when you believe something is yours, you also believe it can be taken from you. And the moment that happens, or even threatens to happen, fear begins to grow. You start protecting, controlling, clinging tighter. Not because you're weak, but because you've confused having with being. This is where things quietly begin to fall apart. Viktor Frankl observed that the people who suffered the most were not always the ones who lost the most, but often the ones who felt they had nothing left to be once everything they had was gone. Let that sink in. If your identity is built on what you own, whether it's a person, a title, or a version of yourself, then the loss of it doesn't just hurt, it destabilizes you. But there's another way to see it. What if nothing was ever meant to be possessed, only experienced? A relationship is not something you own, it's something you live. A moment is not something you keep, it's something you encounter. Even your success is not something you hold, it's something you express. And once you start seeing life this way, something shifts. You stop trying to freeze things in place. You stop demanding permanence from a world that was never designed to give it. Instead, you begin to engage more deeply, more honestly, because you're no longer distracted by the fear of losing it. Paradoxically, when you stop trying to possess life, you actually start to experience it more fully. And here's where Frankl's perspective cuts deeper. The one thing that was never taken from him, even in the most brutal conditions, was his ability to choose how he experienced each moment. Not the moment itself, not the suffering, but his attitude toward it. That was his. And that's yours too. So maybe the problem isn't that nothing belongs to you. Maybe it's that you've been trying to hold on to the wrong things, because the only thing that was ever truly yours is the way you respond to what passes through your life. And once you realize that, clinging starts to feel unnecessary. Lesson 3. The more you try to control life, the more it controls you. There's a silent deal most people make without realizing it. If I can just control enough things, I'll finally feel at peace. So you plan more, think more, analyze every possibility, try to anticipate every outcome. You rehearse conversations in your head, imagine worst-case scenarios, and convince yourself that if you just prepare enough, nothing will catch you off guard. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more you try to control life, the more your inner state becomes dependent on things that were never in your control to begin with. And slowly, almost invisibly, your peace starts to disappear. Viktor Frankl saw this pattern in its most extreme form. In a place where control was completely stripped away, where nothing external could be guaranteed, he noticed a powerful divide. Those who tried to mentally fight every uncontrollable reality, who resisted the uncertainty with constant inner tension, often broke down faster. Not because they were weaker, but because they were trying to impose control on a reality that refused to obey. And that friction, that constant internal resistance, became unbearable. What Frankl discovered wasn't passive acceptance or giving up. It was something far more demanding, the ability to distinguish between what can be controlled and what must be faced. Because control in excess becomes a trap. You start believing that your emotional stability depends on outcomes, on people behaving a certain way, on plans going exactly as expected, on life aligning with your expectations. And when it doesn't, you don't just feel disappointed, you feel destabilized, as if something inside you is collapsing. This is where attachment and control quietly merge. You don't just want something, you need it to go a certain way. You don't just hope, you demand. And without realizing it, you build a life where your inner peace is constantly being negotiated with external circumstances. That's not stability. That's dependency. But here's the shift that changes everything. What if peace was never supposed to come from control? What if it comes from your relationship with uncertainty itself? Frankl believed that even when everything external is taken away, one thing remains untouched: the freedom to choose your attitude. Not the outcome, not the situation, but the way you stand in front of it. And that changes the entire game. Because when you stop trying to control what you can't, you reclaim energy. Mental space opens up. The constant background noise of "what if" starts to fade. You become more present, not because life is predictable, but because you're no longer fighting its unpredictability at every step. And strangely, this doesn't make you passive. It makes you more effective. You act where action is possible, and you let go where it isn't. Control promises safety, but often delivers anxiety. Letting go of control feels risky, but it's the only place where real stability begins. Not the kind that depends on everything going right, but the kind that remains even when things go wrong. And when you reach that point, something unexpected happens. Life doesn't feel like something you have to manage anymore. It becomes something you can finally face without fear running the show. Lesson 4. Loss is not the end of meaning. It's where meaning is tested. Most people don't fear loss because of what disappears. They fear it because of what they believe disappears with it. Their sense of direction, identity, and purpose. It's not just losing something. It's the terrifying question that follows: who am I without this? And that's where attachment reveals its deepest consequence. When your meaning is tied to something temporary, its absence doesn't just hurt, it leaves a void that feels impossible to fill. But Viktor Frankl's life challenges that assumption in the most direct way imaginable. He didn't theorize about loss. He lived through a reality where nearly everything was taken from him. And yet, instead of concluding that life had lost its meaning, he reached a radically different understanding. Meaning is not something that disappears when circumstances collapse. It's something that is confronted in those exact moments. This is where most people turn away. Because as long as life is stable, it's easy to feel like things make sense. But when something breaks, when a relationship ends, when a plan fails, when a version of your life dissolves, you're forced into a position you didn't choose. And in that position, you don't get to rely on what you had before. You're faced with a deeper question. Can you still find meaning now? Not in spite of the loss, but through it. That idea feels almost uncomfortable because it challenges the belief that meaning should protect you from pain. But Frankl saw the opposite. He saw that suffering, when unavoidable, becomes a kind of test, not of your strength in the conventional sense, but of your orientation toward life itself. Will you collapse into emptiness, or will you respond in a way that gives the suffering a purpose? And that doesn't mean pretending things are okay. It doesn't mean forcing positivity or denying grief. Loss should be felt. It should disrupt you. But what happens after that disruption is where everything changes. Because if meaning only exists when life is going well, then it's fragile. It disappears the moment you need it most. Frankl's insight was that meaning must be deeper than circumstances. It has to be something you can choose, even when nothing around you feels meaningful. That choice might look small from the outside: how you carry pain, how you treat others despite your own struggle, how you refuse to let bitterness define your perspective. But internally, it's everything. This is the turning point most people never reach. They wait for life to restore what was lost so they can feel whole again. But meaning doesn't come from restoring the past. It comes from how you face the present. And when you begin to see loss not as the destruction of meaning, but as the place where it is most intensely demanded, something shifts inside you. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is being asked of me now?" That question doesn't remove the pain, but it transforms it. Because in that moment, you're no longer just someone who lost something. You become someone who is responding to life at its deepest level. Lesson 5. The only thing that is truly yours is how you respond after everything is stripped away. Every illusion of control, every attachment, every expectation that life should go a certain way, there comes a moment that feels almost unsettling in its simplicity. It's a quiet confrontation. No noise, no distractions, no comforting narratives left to hold on to. Just you and reality as it is. And in that space, a question begins to surface, whether you want to face it or not. If nothing external is truly mine, then what is? Because when you really look at it, everything you once relied on can change without your permission. People leave, even when they promise to stay. Plans collapse, even when they seemed perfectly structured. Versions of yourself that once felt solid begin to dissolve as life moves forward. And if your sense of identity was built on any of these things, their loss doesn't just create pain, it creates disorientation. It makes you feel like you've lost part of yourself. But Viktor Frankl arrived at a conclusion that cuts through that confusion with almost brutal clarity. In circumstances where nearly every external freedom was taken from him, he recognized that one thing remained untouched, something so fundamental that most people overlook it entirely in ordinary life: the freedom to choose his attitude in any given moment. Not the power to change reality instantly, not the ability to escape suffering, but the ability to decide how he would stand in relation to it. And that realization doesn't just offer comfort, it demands something from you. Because if your response is truly yours, then your life cannot be reduced to what happens to you. It means that even in situations you didn't choose, you are still in some way choosing who you become within them. And that's where many people feel resistance rising. Because it's easier to believe that your life is defined by circumstances than to accept that, despite those circumstances, you are still responsible for your direction. This doesn't mean denying pain. It doesn't mean pretending that loss, anxiety, or uncertainty don't affect you. They do, deeply. But there is a difference between being influenced by what happens and being defined by it. And that difference is exactly where your freedom exists. Think about it. Two people can go through the same failure, the same rejection, the same kind of loss, and walk away as completely different individuals. One becomes bitter, closed off, convinced that life is something to defend against. The other, while still wounded, chooses to remain open, to learn, to find some form of meaning even in the difficulty. The situation didn't determine the outcome. The response did. And this is where Frankl's philosophy becomes intensely practical, not abstract. Your response is not a single dramatic decision you make once in your life. It's built in small, often unnoticed moments. It's in how you speak to yourself when things go wrong. It's in whether you default to blame or reflection. It's in whether you allow pain to harden you or deepen you. These choices don't feel significant in isolation, but over time, they accumulate. They shape your character. They define the quality of your life in a way that no external achievement ever could. And here's the uncomfortable part that most people try to avoid. If your response is yours, then you can't fully blame your life on anything or anyone else. You can acknowledge influence. You can recognize injustice, difficulty, and limitation. But at the deepest level, you are still the one deciding how those forces will be integrated into your life. Whether they become excuses or material for growth. Whether they close you off or refine your understanding of what truly matters. This is not about control. It's about ownership, not of circumstances, but of your position within them. And when you begin to live from that place, something shifts internally. You stop waiting for life to stabilize before you allow yourself to feel grounded. You stop postponing your sense of meaning until things finally go your way. Instead, you start to realize that meaning is not something you arrive at when everything is perfect. It's something you create through the way you respond to imperfection. That realization brings a different kind of strength. Not the fragile strength that depends on things going according to plan, but a quieter, more resilient kind. The kind that remains even when plans fall apart. Because it's not rooted in outcomes, it's rooted in your stance toward whatever comes. And over time, this changes how you relate to everything else. You care, but you don't cling. You engage, but you don't depend. You build, but you're not destroyed when something breaks. Because your foundation is no longer outside of you. It's in the one place that has always been yours, even when you didn't realize it. So in the end, the truth is both simple and demanding. Nothing in this world is truly yours to keep. Not permanently, not completely. Not in the way you once believed, but the way you meet life, the way you carry what happens to you. The meaning you extract from both joy and suffering, that is yours. And every single day, whether you notice it or not, you are shaping it.